Thank you very much. Gen Z are the fastest growing portion of the global workforce. We now make up over 27% of it, and that number is only set to increase for the second half of the 2020s. Yet, we're the least engaged, turning over at the highest rate of any early careers generation, and don't seem to want the leadership positions in the businesses that we currently work in. So it seems we have a situation. And I know what you might be thinking. Gen Z, they're lazy, entitled, don't want to work, just want to finish at 5 o'clock, go and have a matcha latte, do a hot yoga class and become TikTok influencers. Okay, I mean, do like a matcha latte. But what I'm here to tell you is that Gen Z are inherently none of those things. We are misunderstood and mismanaged. But haven't there always been generational differences? Why bother looking at this now? And it's true. There's always been that classic generational cycle of young thinks old are out of touch and old thinks that young are lazy. That's always been there and likely will always be there. But something has fundamentally shifted. Gen Z are the first digitally native generation in the history of humankind. I like to phrase it that we're part of the largest uncontrolled social experiment in history. What happens when you combine rapidly evolving technologies with young adolescent minds? We're only just scratching the tip of that surface, of that iceberg, to see what does it actually mean. And so what actually are we going to explore today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to touch on. The digital native reality, understanding digital natives, and then looking at how does that go into the workplace? And then fundamentally, what's the solution to move this conversation forward? So let's start at the beginning. What is a digital native, that term? Well, simply defined as a person whose cognitive and social development was shaped by being born into a digital world. Now, what's really interesting at the moment in the world of work and in the world in general is we have both digital natives and digital adopters in the workplace in the world at the same time. As you'll see by this visual behind me, we have 4 generations comfortably in the workplace. Baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, forming the digital adopters, adopting into a digital world. And then you see Gen Z, the first digitally native generation in the workplace. But as you can see from that visual, Gen Z are the first, but very much not the last digitally native generation. That bracket is only going to expand over time to get larger and larger until it eventually comprises the entirety of the world of work and the world as we know it. But we are at a transition phase, and it is important to understand how to create a way of working that meets the needs of every generation. And when we talk about generations, there is a really important question we have to ask ourselves. Shouldn't we just focus on the individual? Why bother actually looking at the generation? Well, what I'd like to share and contribute to that conversation is a generation doesn't define us, it simply frames us. It's not about providing boxes or labels, it's about deeper context, empathy, and understanding. But as I showed you just before, this isn't about one generation against another. This is about a fundamental inflection point that I believe started in 1996. So I'll bring you back. So in 1995, the internet was commercialized, catalyzing the digital world as we know it today. Gen Z, as you saw from the previous diagram, was born in 1996. Everyone born from 1996 onwards is digitally native. So it is critical that both society and businesses start to understand how do we engage these generations coming through. So the digitally native reality, as you can see behind me, these are some of the amazing technologies that are forming that digital landscape today, from social media to smartphones to platform ecosystems, think everything from Amazon to Uber, and the internet and AI. There are some amazing technologies in the world today, but they are also coming with an increasingly large amount of behavioral side effects. And the reality is I could touch on every single one of these and unpack them with you and do that in my longer keynotes, but I want to illustrate the wider point today, which can be best illustrated by this photo. So I just invite you to take that in and notice that something has been removed from the photo, the device, the screen. And so this is a brilliant project by the artist Eric Pickersgill, and he removed the device from these everyday moments to illustrate actually the reality that young people are going through. As you look at that, I just invite you to think, what words come up for you? What do you feel as you see that? And the point I'd like to add to this is that the average person from Gen Z spends 8 to 10 hours a day on a screen. That is radically different to any other generation's adolescence. We are experiencing the majority of our everyday moments through a digital layer. And no doubt, this impacts every generation. As you can see, the artist builds on this and it can see all these everyday moments unfolding. But what it does for Gen Z is it impacts us in our formative years, when we're more neuroplastic, more impressionable, when we actually are still forming our understanding of the world. Our prefrontal cortex hasn't yet fully developed. And so when we look at this, there's so many areas that are changing, but one of the ones I'll bring to life right now is around how communication is shifting. So in this moment, we're having synchronous embodied communication. Synchronous in that, as I'm speaking, you are hearing me talk. Embodied in that we are physically here together. For those that are watching this back, it will be asynchronous and disembodied, but that's actually the reality that Gen Z have grown up with. Asynchronous communication, i.e. TikTok, social media platforms, WhatsApp and Snapchat as a way of communicating. And then disembodied, i.e. not as much time in person communicating. That is so radically different as a communication norm, not just for a generation, but for society. And so we have to look at actually understanding what does this mean for the world of work. But just before I touch on that, you see this young girl just in the corner here. So she was around 6, 7 at the time. What I love about this project, and it is actually quite concerning, it's from 2014. That's over a decade ago. I just saw someone literally gasp. And it literally is from over a decade ago. So that young girl is actually Gen Z in the workplace right now. And so it's understanding how do we know more about this generation to unlock their potential. We have to move away from this understanding, which is we look at the fish, we isolate the fish. Gen Z, they're this, they're that. Rather than looking at the water the fish has grown up in. And the water is incredibly hyperstimulating and often incredibly polluted. So this is leading to impacts for digitally native generations in the workplace in so many different areas, as you can see behind me. And in my longer keynotes and workshops, dive into every single one of these, but I want to illustrate the point just through alluding to feedback. So, in the world of work for other generations, it used to be no news is good news. Crack on. It's now very much changed to no news is bad news. As a generation, we have grown up with hyper-personalized instant feedback loops. Think everything from an Oura ring to social media. We're used to getting data and feedback personalized to us on how we're doing and interacting with the world. So if we then go into the workplace where this is slowed down, rather than creating a sense of contentment to crack on, for a lot of Gen Z, it can create disengagement and often anxiety. So that's just one example of how things are changing. But I'll dive a bit deeper into leadership because that's where things get quite juicy. And this statistic brings that to life. Deloitte did an amazing study where they found that 53% of millennials say that their primary career goal is to have a leadership position in the business they currently work in. They did that same study with Gen Z, and that number was only 6%. Only 6% of Gen Z say their primary leadership goal is to have a leadership position in their current business. That should be sending alarm bells around every single HR, L&D, and leadership team as to what on earth is going on here. And there is so much that I could unpack, but I will again allude to the overarching point that most businesses are trying to engage Gen Z a bit like this woman is trying to fuel her car. This is a woman in Canada having a pretty tough day. What is happening here is that she is fueling a Tesla with petrol and, expecting it to drive. And that's the analogy I use for how businesses are currently trying to motivate and engage younger generations. They're using outdated leadership models, outdated incentives and ways of working. And so that's where that analogy comes from. And as far as I'm aware, this isn't AI generated. This is just a difficult moment for this lady. But when they get the leadership models right, when they know how to tap into digitally native generations, businesses unlock a whole host of amazing strengths. The data behind all of these strengths is really brilliant. And you've got everything from adaptability, deeper network thinking, a digital intuition, more likely to proactively upskill. There are so many strengths to digitally native generations, but unfortunately, most businesses are experiencing the challenges. They're experiencing what I would say are three intersecting challenges that are feeding into each other. So they're noticing in young people that they're more likely to be less resilient, to have more communication anxiety, to disengage faster. And then leaders, noticing that leaders are out of touch, struggling to connect. How do I actually motivate and engage this generation? With a growing frustration and feeling just kind of overreactive to the world of work. But what I'd like to share as well, this goes straight to the bottom line, impacting everything from lost performance to rising attrition costs, not to mention the fact that the future of literally every business depends on how they engage the digitally native generations coming through. So why is this happening? Well, there is a capability gap. A brilliant study with 50 of the largest employers around the world found that 83% of their executives said that a multi-generational workforce was critical to their success and growth. Yet only 5% said they know how to unlock that potential. That is a whopping 78% capability gap. A gap so large, it led me and my co-founder to create a consultancy and training company designed to literally close that gap. And I believe there's a reason we work with some of the largest businesses in the world, from multiple FTSE and Fortune partners, because they see what's coming. They see how important and how hot this topic really is to get right. So what do we do when we're working with them to close that gap? Fundamentally, what's the solution to all of this? Generational intelligence. You may have heard of social or emotional intelligence. It's wrapping it into that generational lens. Simply defined as the ability to effectively understand, empathize, and communicate across age groups. It is a timeless behavioral and strategic skill set that businesses quite simply now not just would like to have, but must have at the foundation of how they work. And when we're working with businesses to embed this, we notice a whole host of amazing measurable benefits come around as a result. Everything from faster innovation to a more resilient workforce, deeper knowledge exchange across the organization, heightened productivity, and my favorite one, the golden nugget at the top, improved communication. And all of those areas, they go straight to the bottom line too. Unfortunately, businesses are going wrong by having one of three mindsets. They usually fall into one of these three camps. So the first one, blame, just focusing on that fish that I mentioned earlier, just isolating it to the generation and just blaming them with language and projecting these biases, and they propagate throughout the organization. The second one is pandering, overcorrecting just for Gen Z, focusing on one generation and making it just about Gen Z, when actually this is a multi-generational workforce that we have in the world right now, where we have digital adopters and digital natives at the same time. And finally, just simply ignoring that this is really happening, hoping that it will just blow over, that we aren't at this critical inflection point that kick-started in 1996. So where are businesses going right? Well, fundamentally, they're being proactive. They're starting at the top where culture can cascade. They're designing mixed modality training to build that early career and manager and leadership capability together with shared frameworks, shared language. Fundamentally, they're embedding generational intelligence business-wide. As you can see from some of these logos here, these are some of the partners that we worked with and work with over the last year and so. And they're industry leaders all the way from retail and media to finance and legal. Despite their different industries, they all see how important this topic is, and are experiencing and noticing similar challenges and opportunities. They're experiencing what this young fellow is experiencing as the perfect storm. Now, this one is AI generated, and he is quite literally flying horizontally because there are these conditions in the world right now that have led to this perfect storm. Everything from AI accelerating to the global instability that we see, higher mistrust in institutions, a pandemic we're riding off the back of. I won't go on after I run out of breath, but there's a lot of intersecting factors in the world of work right now that are leading us to a tipping point to get it right when it comes to engaging digital natives and a multi-generational workforce. I believe that tipping point is the second half of the 2020s. Businesses really, when it comes to this area, are noticing that the cost of inaction is compounding in too great of a way to ignore. The gaps between and within generations are only getting larger and larger as the rates of technology continue to increase at such rapid rates. Whether businesses like it or not, the bill has arrived either way. Some are paying it proactively as an investment in their people and their organizations, present and future, but unfortunately most are paying it reactively in the form of sunk costs. Think everything from higher disengagement to re-recruitment fees. The costs are very much there that businesses are now paying. So, the reality is that we are now, all businesses and society, are moving into a world of work that is becoming increasingly digitally native and increasingly multi-generational. Most businesses are currently experiencing that as a massive source of tension. And I specialize in helping businesses embed generational intelligence, understand and unlock the potential of digital natives to turn that source of tension into an incredible source of opportunity. Thank you.